Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall, and I am the host of The Faces. Entrepreneurs are people too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and the here and bill payer of this podcast. So I appreciate you, Telehelping, for allowing me the opportunity and team to talk to wonderful people like Katie. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm excited to have you. It's going to be a wonderful podcast. And I know that this is such a new experience. It's going to be exciting to just kind of see where the conversation takes us. But before we run off too far in one direction, as commonly I do, tell the listeners today, who is Katie? Who are we chatting with here today?
I am Katie Kristofic. I have 2 kids and a wonderful husband. That's first and foremost. And then career-wise, I spent the last 20 years in marketing communications for pharma and biotech. And most recently, I have started my own company in the caregiving space called the Carefulest.
That's awesome. And so, moving from big pharma, I worked in pharmaceuticals for a very short stint there in the HR side, right? And so it was an interesting world, the people who find themselves in pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah.
And the names of some of the jobs, right? I was like, what does this person do?
Right. They're creative names, but they aren't descriptive, really.
No, I remember when I came on to be the senior manager and later on as the vice president, it was the CEO was explaining to me like, hey, listen, you're going to see some of these doctors' salaries, okay? And we just have to remember that these people are trying to cure cancer here. And he was not lying. So he was not lying when he said how big some of those salaries could be. But, so you were in marketing for pharmaceuticals. What's marketing like in the pharmaceutical world? Like, I know pharmaceuticals is heavily regulated. So
Very.
What's that like?
Yeah. So I was in the B2B space. So it was a pharmaceutical ingredients company where I spent the bulk of my career. And that was really interesting because they created ingredients that are called excipients, which is like a bulking agent within the medication. So you have the active ingredient, and that's what big pharma does. That's the thing that cures or treats or whatever. And then you have smaller companies that do the rest of like the tablet or the pill that you're taking so that it doesn't disintegrate too soon or get absorbed in the wrong part of your body.
Oh, wow.
So where I was excipients, which is that bulking agent, and drug delivery systems, which is super interesting and actually was a pivotal moment for me in the trajectory of what I'm doing now. So drug delivery systems, if you've ever taken like an allergy pill or if you have migraines, there was a commercial some time ago for Nurtec ODT, and I think Serena Williams was the spokesperson. You put the tablet on your tongue and it disintegrates. You don't need water. You don't need anything. It just dissolves in your mouth. And the reason that they started creating that technology is because 60% of people have something called dysphagia, which is difficulty swallowing pills.
Oh, wow.
So it could be any reason.
I hate swallowing pills. So,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some people just flat out don't like it. Some people are not able if they have dementia or Parkinson's or other diseases that put them at risk for choking. So it's really a safety thing. And then on top of that, there are areas of the world where they don't have safe, clean water to be able to take pills. So that technology in and of itself is life-saving.
Wow, that's incredible. That's interesting that you talk about like the complexities of the medication because we're always thinking like, oh, big pharma, and then we don't think about like, well, there's some folks out there that do some special jobs here. It's interesting too because I was at a car event once, and I saw this gentleman standing next to a very expensive car, and I was like, he's just standing there. I'm going to chat with him, right? I'm going to engage this fella. And so I started getting to know him a little bit more over the course of this weekend event. And it turns out he designs like gel capsules, right? He's like a physician or doctor of some sort of scientist that designs gel capsules, and people pay him a lot of money. Like he's like, I was paid the Advil, PM gel capsule. He's like, I designed that. And I was like, wow, talk about odd jobs. I'm like, no one asked you if you want to do that in high school, right?
They definitely did not.
My guidance counselor was not equal to yours. So mine was like, you should go to the military. So, well, that's
But
great.
look
Well,
where it led you. I mean, it wasn't
right.
necessarily wrong.
Talk about getting around the mountain, right? Just to get to the other side. No, but yeah, hilarious stuff. And I'm sure he didn't start off that way either, right? But it's great that you start off as well, that you're you have a husband and a family. And so talk about the non-business side of you. What do you do for fun? Talk about your family.
Yeah. Well, I live in Delaware. So Delaware's very, very small place, and we can be to the beach in less than an hour. We can be to Maryland in 20 minutes. We can be to Pennsylvania in half an hour. We can be to New Jersey in half an hour. So it's a great place to like start somewhere, and then you can get to lots of cool places,
Cool.
From where you are. So we love to take day trips down to Baltimore and the National Aquarium and, do fun things like that. I am a baker. My kids love the fact that I'm a baker. So we do a lot of things in the kitchen together, and we are big fans of comedy. So we love to watch funny movies together as a family. My son's hero is Adam Sandler.
Worst heroes to have.
He did a book report on him this past year. I'm like, I can't believe your teacher let you do that. But
right.
They had to do a biography, and there's a biography of Adam Sandler. So he went for it.
Not a bad person to do a biography on. Talking about a guy
Yeah.
who's turned a piece of sand into a molehill, right?
Yeah.
He is an empire of comedy and videos, right? And so,
Yeah.
not a bad role model, right? And he's also been really great to his group, his network.
That's what we talk about a lot. Yeah.
He really, this whole thing is like bringing people up with you. And I remember one time, my ex-father-in-law, probably the only thing I miss from my ex is my father-in-law. And he sat there and he's like, what's the point of success if, if you're the only one at the top, right? It's like, bring people with you. And Adam Sandler's a great example of that. Like,
yes,
bringing his crew along with him, putting them in movies, and they're great actors, right? He didn't give them anything they didn't deserve, except an opportunity. And so,
yes.
then they've had this like huge, amazing lives because of it. And so,
yeah,
he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
I love that. Interesting role model. I don't know. Do I have one? I don't even have a role model. I don't know. Me either. I'm not sure. I think someone said who I look up to every day is me. I look up to me. Big role model, Cody. That's great. So, Delaware is a great place to start, you said. So it's kind of like you're 30 minutes from everywhere. It kind of sounds like Europe in a sense, right? And so it's like when you're in like a small European country, like you just, Belgium's here, you got Norwegian's here,
right.
You got Scotland there. Yeah. So that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, we can be to New York in 2 hours, DC in 2 hours, Boston in 4 hours, Pittsburgh in 4 hours. Like, yeah, you can be a lot of places in a short amount of time.
I live on the very southern tip of the Baja California Peninsula. So if you follow California all the way down,
right,
the very like literally the very tip. The very tip is like to see the ocean, and it's an interesting place because we're far from everything. I'm 2 hours by flight from LA. 2 hours from flight from Ciudad de Mexico. And so I'm 2 hours from everywhere by flight, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. So you were running so you have this family, you love spending time with them, and then you're like, you know what? I'm tired of hanging out with them. I want to start a business. Right? Isn't that the common thought process? Like you have to spend so much time starting a business. Like, what? Like you guys have been great. You've been a good laugh. Right, I'm going to go hang out with my business now. Talk about how that transition has been, right? Because you went, I imagine you worked in marketing and in pharmaceuticals, right? That allowed a fairly structured life, right?
Yes.
And so then, you have this fix with your family, and then all of a sudden you start your own business, which knows no bounds.
Right. That's true. So on the personal side of things, there was a relative amount of upheaval. About 12 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so we had to, as a family, kind of figure out what the caregiving situation was going to be. My kids were really little. So I was 32 and standing in my dining room looking at my Christmas tree, holding my newborn, and my 3-year-old was like at my feet. And my mom was standing next to me talking about the same cluster of ornaments on the tree for the fourth day in a row and saying the exact same things. And I was like, okay, all the things I've expected and suspected about what's going on here completely confirmed for me. So what are we going to do? Fast forward a bunch of time. And because I live a couple hours away from my family, I needed to figure out how I could still participate in her care, even though I wasn't
Yeah.
right there. So I took on a lot of basically like the remote work version of caregiving. Everything I can do online. I can schedule appointments. I can do research. I can find products. I can network and figure out what comes next and what we need to do. And it was really frustrating for me because there's a lot of information out there, but it's really hard to find. It took forever. You have to know certain words to even get different things to come up
Yeah.
that you're looking for.
Trigger words, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there was one particular instance where my mom had dropped a lot of weight, which is very common in dementia patients, and she needed a whole new wardrobe. In addition to the fact that she lost her fine motor skills, she couldn't do buttons and things like that anymore. There are millions of people out there who have that situation. I know clothes exist that are easy for people to put on. I spent 3 hours trying to find them, finally came across it, and the word I needed was adaptive. Adaptive clothing, adaptive utensils. Once I hit on the word adaptive, it was like this whole other world of the internet opened up. But it took me 3 hours to find it. I was like, this is ridiculous. People can't continue to struggle like this to find the things that they need when they're dealing with really hard stuff. So I thought somebody else would do it. Oh, it's that whole like imposter syndrome thing of it's not me. I didn't go to Harvard. I'm not a tech bro. Like, I have a communications degree from a state school in Pennsylvania. I'm a girl. It's not my world. Somebody else has already cornered the market on this. And the fact of the matter is, people aren't going to solve a problem that they don't have. And I was the one having the problem. My friends were the ones having the problem. And with my marketing communication background, I knew enough to be dangerous. And so 2023 came along, and I call that my year of 2 pushes and a shove. I was laid off from pharma and biotech twice that year.
Oh, wow.
And my mom passed. So I got to October of that year and suddenly had a whole lot of time on my hands. And nobody else had done what I was thinking about doing. And I talked to my husband. We were like, look, it's now or never. Like, this is the time. If you were ever going to try to do this, let's see if we can make it work. The kids are a little bit older. And, why not add a whole new level of crazy?
It's fun, my great-grandmother had Alzheimer's, and my grandmother definitely has, even shoulder, she has like some of the early indicators of it as well.
Yeah.
So it's very scary, right?
Yes.
The idea of Alzheimer's. And so, one, can only express my deepest sympathies for having to manage that. It's tough, right?
Thank you.
And then also trying to manage that and not knowing how to manage that. So it's like figuring it out. And it really is an entrepreneurial journey because,
Yes.
through all aspects of my career, I've always just faked it, right? Everyone's like, oh, he gets figured out. He knows he's like blue, red, blue.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I'm like, blue looks better than red. Let's go with blue in my mind. I'm like, but blue, right? And so you're just trying to figure it out. And so, it's interesting that you said that about that body of people as well, because it made me think of one of my first investor calls from my previous healthcare company, which our primary focus was on the higher risk folks leaving hospitals going back home. Alzheimer patients being a part of those, right?
Yeah.
When you're in a hospital, right, you got everything, right? There's every doctor for the most part, nurses everywhere. You're not going to starve and generally not going to die, right? If you're there, right? And then you leave, and I used to always say there's like this stepping off a cliff. Like we call it stepping off of the hospital, but I'm like, it's really a stepping off the cliff.
Absolutely.
And depending on what you have at home, right? You don't know how far that step is, right? Think about like your mother, like if she did not have you, like what that experience would have been like. And so recognizing that delta, that difference, I'm sure it was a strong driver for starting the company.
Absolutely. And you're right. It is like stepping off a cliff because a lot of people don't realize if you're the person at the hospital who shows up to give someone a ride home, you are the person that the hospital is trusting with their complete next set of care. They're going to give you all the paperwork. They're going to give you all the instructions. And you're like, dude, I thought I was just giving them a ride. Not as far as the hospital's concerned. You are in charge of
Yeah.
them from here on out. And good luck to you with no
You
training,
are the
no
caregiver.
resources. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so crazy that you're in that because, that company actually spurred the start of telehelping, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't think we quite understood how much need there was when we got into the space. And then
Yeah.
when we got into the space, we're like, oh my goodness, we called it biopsychosocial,
Mhm.
right? Biology, psychology, and then the social implications of healthcare. Like,
Yep.
do they have a caregiver? Do they have access to transportation,
Right.
medication? And so it was such an impactful period because I realized so many people didn't have a ride home. And what if you don't have a ride home? You're taking the
Yeah.
bus, right?
Yeah. Or they're going to stick you in an Uber. Good luck.
Correct. Good luck. Or do they send your medication to the wrong pharmacy? And by the way,
All the
you don't
time.
have a car, right? They did it to my wife and they just discharged her from the hospital in Las
Mhm.
Vegas. They're like, oh, by the way, we sent your medication to the pharmacy. I look at the pharmacy, it's across town, right? I was like, hey, you sent it to the wrong pharmacy. Like, well, we can't change the pharmacy. I'm like, I had like a twitch. I was like, lady, I'm like, you're the problem with the healthcare system, right?
Uh-huh.
I was like, this literally the proof of concept for my company was the fact that you people, hospitals, do this, and you're like, good luck. I'm sorry that you can't get over there to get your medication that you need to, and
Right.
so, and it was just it's so interesting that you've gotten into this space because it's something I was so passionate about, and we were providing 30 days of caregiving, right? 30 days,
Mhm.
like not life caregiving, but 30 days of like, we just want you to make it that 30 days so you don't get readmitted to the hospital. And ideally in that time
Right.
period, we've tried to plug some holes for you, right?
Mhm.
What is your business focus on in terms of, because mine was like the 30 days, because we're compensated by the hospital,
Yeah.
not to make sure they survive that 30-day period. Because if you can survive that
Mhm.
30-day period, the idea is you'll keep surviving. And
Right.
so ideally, so what period do you focus on?
Yeah.
What do you do?
So my company focuses on long-term care needs. So family members, friends, neighbors who are caregivers, and a lot of times they don't recognize the fact that they are a caregiver. They just think they're being the dutiful son, the loving wife, whatever. Fact of the matter is, if you're administering medication, if you are doing wound care, if you're doing any of those things, you are somebody's caregiver. So we focus on the long term folks because that is I don't want to say it's the biggest strain, but it kind of is because the longer you do it, the more of a toll it takes on you as the healthy person taking care of somebody else. So, dementia, Parkinson's, ALS, multiple sclerosis, special needs, children born with medical complexity. So, our audience isn't, parents with healthy children at home. It's
Correct.
this longer process. And, it's caregiving is it is like another full-time job. And it often demands more of you in time and energy and everything else than a regular paying job does. And 53 million Americans are doing it unpaid every day.
It's crazy you say that because I thought one of the most interesting statistics from my time with my healthcare company was that we used to get a lot of caregivers that would call in
Mhm.
and it would seem like they were just there to talk, right? And because, well, and so started telehelping to staff remote nurses and care management personnel in Mexico for my company
Mhm.
because I didn't like our Philippine counterparts, right? Wasn't a
Mhm.
big fan of and I wanted the Spanish speaking back and forth versus,
Yeah.
just English. And so when I moved here, that was the entire purpose of telehelping to support the healthcare company. And a
Mhm.
lot of our virtual staff was like Mexican mothers. Like we had a lot of Mexican moms, and there's no one better than a Latin mom to sit there and listen to you, right, and chat with
Yeah.
you. And so they reported a lot of time spent on the phone just talking to people
Yeah.
because it seemed like, it just seems like such a lonely burden, right? It seems like a
It's
very low,
extremely isolating. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's
So,
uncomfortable. People who you think will be there for you, unfortunately, a lot of times they're not. Now, the flip side of that is people will step up that you would never have expected. And so, that's like a lovely silver lining to
great.
things. But you have to be in a place where you can see that and let go of the disappointment of the people who didn't show up the way you thought they would.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because, my mother lives with me. She's disabled, right?
Hmm.
And she is not, she doesn't suffer from dementia, but she's had so many seizures throughout her life that she
Yeah.
doesn't, she's cognitively, I place her at 16, right? I feel
Hmm.
like I'm arguing with a teenager sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And so she lives in my guest house here, my casita. And she's interesting because right now she comes back and forth to here in the United States, but in the United States she lives with my grandmother, right,
Hmm.
who's 88 years old, right,
Yeah.
who by the way is the caregiver for her partner of like 40 years who is a severe diabetic, right? And so we have this
Yep.
88-year-old woman caring for her, caring for my mom.
Right.
And I was talking to my grandmother just yesterday,
Hmm.
crazy coincidence here, and I was like, hey, I think it's really important that you, my two brothers, and we all get on a phone call and start talking about like what is your dying wish for the management of mom after
Yeah.
you pass, right? And like I said, because while we never want it, you're going to succumb to mortality at some point,
Hmm.
right? And my older brother, has wants nothing to do with my mom. We have a really tough relationship, and so she's like, "Oh, I'm not living with me," right? And then my
Hmm.
my younger brother, his wife is like, "Not happening," right?
Yeah.
And so I said, "Great, well." Because she's a dependent of the United States, she has to have a home base, right, where
Hmm.
she stays most of the time. Like that has to be somewhere, and
Right.
we need to know what she needs, right? It's crazy that she's
Yeah.
lucky that she has people having this conversation for her.
Yes.
But like you said, right, someone you wouldn't think would pop up is my grandma's like, oh, well, Sharon's going to be her U.S. Home. Sharon, like, okay, Sharon's one of my grandmother's friends, right? You have
Yeah.
like everyone else is like absolutely not, like she can be a lot, right? She's kind of like a bull in a china shop, right? But it's just crazy, like you said, someone's stepping up, and she'll definitely need support from people, right, as she goes through that journey, because it's not going to be easy, especially as she gets older, and as her
Right.
ailments, COPD, type 2 diabetes, these things will progress.
Yes.
And so what do you provide them with? Like, what is the business providing them with that?
Yeah.
And I understand this is healthcare. I want to also know how they pay for it. I'm interested because that's always a question in healthcare. Who's
Right.
paying for it?
Yeah. So we have two buckets of information on the site. There's a caregiving bucket and there's a grief bucket, because those two things very much go hand in hand. And what a lot of people, I think, are surprised by when they start the caregiving journey is how early the grief starts. And grief happens whenever there's a major change. I felt grief when I got laid off, because that was a huge, shocking change. People feel grief when they go through divorce. So if you're in an accident and you're no longer able to do the things you used to do, there's a grief component to that, or a diagnosis or whatever. So we have these two buckets of information. And basically is like Google meets Consumer Reports for the caregiving and grief space.
That's great.
So instead of spending, the average caregiver spends at least 13 hours every month on research for their person. 13 hours. Do you know how many things you can do with
Yeah.
13 hours? Um, Self-care is a huge challenge for caregivers. They're lonely, they're isolated, they, often don't have time or the energy to get out and do something for themselves, even if it's just a 15-minute walk. Um, So the goal of the site is to save them that time and frustration. They can just go to the Carefulest and go, oh, here are all the books. here are the podcasts. These are the organizations I need. These are the products that are really helpful in this situation. So the model for the business is that all of the grief resources are free of charge because grief is hard enough. And it's my personal belief that you shouldn't have to. If you're seeing a counselor who's gone through all kinds of schooling, yeah, you need to pay them. But you shouldn't have to pay to find out what the good podcasts are, where the books are.
Right.
If one of the biggest challenges we had were my kids and all of my nieces and nephews, they were all really little when my mom was going through what she was going through. And there were like no resources to be able to talk to your kids about what's happening and help them work through their grief. They're seeing other kids get to go to the park or to Disney World or wherever with their grandparents. And my kids were looking at life going, I can't even have a conversation with her because she lost her ability to speak. So we need to be able to navigate and help people through that. So the grief portion is free. The caregiving side, some of the pieces are free of charge because it's stuff you could fairly easily find on your own. And then there's a membership component to it, which then gives you access to checklists and information and guides that I've personally put together based on my experience. And I talk to, at this point, it's hundreds of caregivers throughout this journey. And knowing what the common challenges are for people and the questions that I get over and over, it's like, okay, I'm going to write a thing on this. We're going to put this together. And so that's behind a paywall, which is currently $20 for the year because we are early on, number one. And number two, healthcare is expensive. And if you're a caregiver, average caregiver is putting out between $8,000 and $10,000 a year to take care of the person that they're caring for. And there are a lot of people in this country that is just a massive hardship.
Well, it's just generally a massive hardship. I mean, I tell all the time, like, and my brothers, and I relate this to, like, I feel like I care for my mother, even though she is not heavy burden weight right now. I pay for her existence, right?
Yeah.
Which is not something I wanted to as a dad of two, right?
Right.
I didn't want a teenager I didn't have yet, right?
Yep.
I'm a dad. I'm a dad of three because my bonus daughter goes to a private boarding school, so I pay for her life too. So I have 4 kids. Right?
Yeah.
One of them is my mother. and so yeah, I mean, I tabulate the cost of that. It's something I tabulate the cost of that, and then you have like all the small things that like my wife does to like make her feel good, right?
Right.
Let's get a pedicure. Let's get your hair done. Even if she's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's not going out in the world, right? I'm afraid to leave her at the grocery store by herself because I feel like she'll just walk off and get lost, right?
Yeah.
And so I tell her, like, because she goes to the grocery store right next to my gym, and say, hey, listen, stay here. I'll be back in an hour, right?
Right.
And I'll come find you, and I'll have to actually come find her. It won't be like I'll call her on the phone. It won't ring, and so it is heavy, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I love what you're doing at the business, and I mean, one thing that we balanced when I was at Artiva is like, where do we cut off? Because we always said, where do we cut off our people who are just conversating and supporting these people with like, hey, we have to take triage calls, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes we would be on the phone, and we came up with this process, right? Rule of thumb, right? If the phone lines were full, we'd always tell them, hey, listen, just so you're aware, like, I'm happy to chat with you, right? However, right now, I'm the only person on call. And so if my phone does ring, I have to terminate this call early because it's not a medical emergency, right? And so I'm here to chat with you, right? Because I'm on shift anyways. and so we did that. But, I just, I hope that you grow into a stage where, you have like a support line, things like that. That would be such a really cool journey. And I would hope that telehelping would be able to be a part of it, because I love the passion that you have for the business and the purpose. And I think there's nothing stronger than, someone starting a business based off something that changed their entire life. Right?
Yes.
And so that's a beautiful journey. I'm really, really excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that we have on the grief side of things is a company called Help Texts. So I don't know if you've heard of them, but they do support for people who are grieving, and it's all through texting. So we don't have a counterbalance to that on the caregiving side. So something to look at.
Yeah, so one thing that we used to support was a business that would do text message reminders and things for medication, like real human text message reminders.
Yeah.
Mixed with AI. And so it was a really cool business that one of telehelping's earlier supporting elements as well.
Yeah.
Just because they were supporting folks with like medication reminders, which you don't think's, important until someone doesn't take the medication.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they have multiple, they call them comorbidities, right? Different things going on. So your mom has seizures, she has epilepsy, she has COPD, you have multiple things going on with you. Suddenly you're in charge of taking 10 or 15 medications, and they're all different dosages and they're all different times.
Correct.
Even someone who is at like peak organizational skill, mental capacity, that gets to be a lot just with daily life to be able to remember, let alone if what you're experiencing is affecting your cognitive ability and all of that. It's a lot. So a lot of people use their phone and have reminders. I have reminders for myself and, for different members of my family who need to take certain things at certain times.
We have one of those live charts of everyone's calendar.
Yeah.
It shows like my kid's school, my wife's schedule, my schedule. It shows my mom's medication schedule there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we even put her nap time on there. And so in that way, everyone knows what everyone's up to at some point or the other.
Right.
But you have to create structures like that. Katie, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise.
I've enjoyed our conversation and such a beautiful purpose that is matched with your company. So I think that is awesome. And I'm really looking forward to catching up in the future and having you back on to see how things have progressed.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me and letting me share my journey.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. Be well.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.